Chair would now like to recognize the Honorable Tamara St, who is a representative from the South Dakota State House of Representatives, for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Leger Fernandez and Ranking Member Obernolte and the members of the subcommittee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 789, repealing existing substandard provisions, encouraging conciliation with the Tribes Act, also known as the RESPECT Act. I wish to also thank Senator Rounds, who represents my beloved state of South Dakota, for providing the leadership in this important legislation. The RESPECT Act can be a base for further work to amend or change federal policies that limit the progress of Native nations and Indigenous people in the United States of America. Many of us in the Great Plains and across the country are excited to see the RESPECT Act finally receive a hearing in the United States House of Representatives. My understanding is that this legislation originated out of tribal consultations when Senator Round's staff was working with the Sioux tribes located in present-day South Dakota on Carlisle Indian School repatriation efforts. I've often heard it described as being a rare, nonpartisan, non-controversial, and no-cost piece of legislation. I thank all of you for giving this legislation the opportunity to be heard. In 2018, I was elected to my first term in the South Dakota House of Representatives. The day that I stepped onto the floor of the State House, I looked up and saw a painting of the sort that's commonly found in many state capitals or courthouses, and done during a time when life was very different in South Dakota. It depicts the typical images of immigrants during the time of settlement on what was once Native homelands for centuries. In the painting above my desk on the House floor is a Native woman with braids covering her bare chest. There also exists a similar painting of a non-Native woman in another location in the capital, and neither would likely be chosen today to portray the women of South Dakota. It's very clear to me that this place wasn't built with me in mind. As a woman in the United States during the late 1800s, early 1900s, I would not have been able to vote until the passing of the 19th Amendment. As a Native American, I would not have been considered a U.S. citizen until 1924. So as a society, we continue to grow and to change as needed. In America, when we know better, we do better. And Senate Bill 789 does just that. It represents the acknowledgement of a past that created hardship and even devastation for Indigenous people in the United States. As a historian, when I relay the history of Native nations, it corresponds directly with federal Indian policies, such as the Indian Removal Act. My own Dakota tribe was removed from the state of Minnesota in 1863 after the Dakota War, where Governor Ramsey called for the extermination of the Dakota. From that era of genocide, we moved into a period known as assimilation. It's from this area that some of the laws identified in the proposed legislation come from. The era of boarding schools, where many Dakota children were forcibly removed from homes and families to be placed in schools as far away as Carlisle, Pennsylvania. The impacts of this policy are still found within our families today. For example, in 1889, Indian Commissioner T.J. Morgan numbered several ways in which assimilation would be carried out. Things that separated children from communities and broke down the Native families and our kinship systems, outlawed such things as traditional languages as well as spirituality. The last paragraph I thought was most telling. It stated the autonomy of the individual will be enforced above all, end quote, meaning that a person is stripped bare of all things that identify them as a Native American person or an Indian person. When these children returned home, as you can imagine, they were often disconnected from their people and families. As one elder once told me, quote, "I knew I did not belong with my people. I knew I did not belong with white people. I didn't belong anywhere." Or how do you show love or connection when you've never experienced it? And this affected my every relationship from marriage to parenting, end quote. These are the same policies that resulted in a loss of spirituality or prayer. Due to the consequences of these antiquated and overly racist laws against Native Americans that are still on the books today, you can imagine how much Native people have had to overcome in order to be here today. In conclusion, we can't change the past, but we can certainly recognize that today as a nation, we know better and can do better. With these things in mind, I ask you to please vote in support of Senate Bill 789, and let's get this legislation to the president's desk. Thank you.
Thank you very